As you might expect with such a popular character, Barney has been gamified from essentially the very beginning. After having previously covered a slew of Barney PC games, I thought it was time that we explored the world of physical Barney games, of which there are almost just as many. To start us on our purple game path is the Barney Balloon Race game, the first Barney board game released by Parker Brothers in 1993. The game's objective is to reach the end of the vertical board and join Barney for a hot air balloon ride, which is not actually a hot air balloon in the traditional sense, but a cluster of balloons tied to a basket. No one tell the FAA. The movement in this game is determined by the magic light, which shines light through a color wheel that players spin each turn. The light is presided over by Baby Bop, who watches from an equally as safe balloon of her own. Some of the more amusing spaces on the board include the duck space, which, when passed or landed on, prompts the other players to quack in support of your progress. In the same vein, the clapping space requires your opponents to put their differences aside and cheer you on. To complete this team-building exercise, upon each player's arrival at the end, all must break into a simultaneous hooray, which I'm sure went exactly as well as you'd expect. Despite a simple premise, the game does feature some nice design elements, namely in the Magic Light's facade and this bandstand full of fans cheering you on, and is a good starting title for young players. Barney's Light and Learn, a 1993 game by Milton Bradley, also features a light-up function, but this time it's Barney himself who wields the light. This game contains 20 different boards separated into easy and challenging categories. Using the printed dots on the board, players must identify the correct objects with the so-called Barney wand, and if the answer is correct, the light will illuminate, and a happy sound that I can only imagine is probably the most bit-crushed Barney laugh known to man, will play. This isn't exactly a board game in the traditional sense the way some of the other titles on here are, but seeing as it does feature boards and a movable game piece, it seemed fair to count. Returning to a more true board game format, and another Parker Brothers game, comes Barney Sounds of Fun, an electronic talking board game from 1993. 1993 was called Barney's Elvis year for a reason. This is the first game we've seen so far to throw cards into the mix, so we're definitely moving up in terms of complexity for preschool board games. After pressing the center button on the main game wheel, a sound effect or one of the dinosaurs will play, with the latter option instructing players on which card category to choose from. Barney Says cards have the player performing an action like touch your toes or similar. Let's Pretend instructs players to act as a certain animal. I Spy utilize the spinner on the other side of the board to get players searching the room for that color, and the other various cards for how many spaces you can move. Most of the marketing fell solely on the sound aspect of the game, and that is a cool feature, but I think the cards in their assorted categories make this 15-square board game into a pretty neat title. The artwork is classic too, making this a solidly memorable game. The Barney Picture Game, another 1993 Parker Brothers title, sends players on a trip across the neighborhood to see who will be the first to take pictures of Baby Bop and Barney at 5 town landmarks. The camera-shaped spinner determines which colored space a player will move to, and cards are drawn on these specific spaces, netting you one of the photos you need, or instructing you to take your own imaginary photo of one of the other players. I appreciate how a lot of these games try to incorporate one of Barney's core tenets, imagination, into the gameplay itself. They don't necessarily progress you forward, but they're fun and improve the experience for younger players. Picture Game's design is pretty neat as well. Instead of being a flat game board, a sort of pizza box-shaped diorama is constructed of the town with its colorful spaces. I'm not sure how it would have held up, especially with a rowdier bunch of kids, but in of itself, it's a very dynamic display. Finally escaping the clutches of 1993, we venture ahead to 1998, and the release of Barney's Great Adventure, Barney's sole, for now, theatrical foray. The marketing push for the film was immense, and brought us icons like our first board game, Barney's Rainbow Egg Game. This Parker Brothers game proudly states that the game is just like the movie, and it's not that far off. The game board follows Twinken's egg journey, and features illustrations of Ralph, Agnes, and the iconic locations of the film. Players spin the wheel to determine which colored space to travel to, and which cards to pick up. In the vein of previous titles, the cards are split into familiar categories like Let's Pretend or the matching game Find Me cards. Upon completing the cards task, a star chip will be rewarded, and the player with the most chips wins. Somewhat amusingly, the rainbow egg spaces instruct you to just go ahead and yeet Twinken yourself, presumably to the next space, but there's something funny about continually tossing the egg we spent an entire movie trying to catch. The game also includes a small Barney figurine, who isn't part of the game but I'm sure is happy to be there. Maybe he's moral support. The board itself is fairly simple, but the art style is that nice, super airbrushed look that's shared across the BGA merch, so I definitely have to give it points there. Follow the Egg game is the second BGA title, and also the second game to utilize Milton Bradley's Light Up Barney pointer from Barney's Light and Learn. Didn't think that'd come back into play, did you? In this game, the Barney wand is utilized a little more cleverly. Upon landing on a magic egg space, players choose one of up to 6 dots on a wheel, and if Barney lights up, they collect an egg token. The spinner definitely adds some replay value here, which other games, unsurprisingly, lack. Another unique aspect of this game is that the player pieces are named characters. Players can choose from Abby, Marcella, Miss Goldfinch, and Absolute Chad Cody. Much like the movie, each egg token collected illuminates another stripe on the egg until Twinkin hatches, and players win by reaching the finish line. This might be my favorite of the Barney board games, not only for the art style, or the fact that it's BGA, which I'm normal about, but for that replay value I mentioned earlier. I think it's cool that Milton Bradley found a way to reuse an asset for an otherwise more traditional board game title. In 2000, Milton Bradley released Barney's first fishing game, a game that is clearly inspired by Hungry Hungry Hippos, but 10 times more chaotic. 24 multicolored plastic fish, and 1 cartoonish boot, are placed in the center of the pond-shaped playing field, and players must mash these paddles as fast as they can to send the fish flying into their side of the pond. If you collect all 6, or 12 if your game is a 2-man duel, you win. Accidentally catapulting the boot in will result in one of your fish being thrown back into the center, so bash wisely. Again, this isn't exactly a board game in the traditional sense, but I think it warrants discussion for the potential injury via flying fish. If this is Barney's first fishing game, I'd love to see the upgrades in Barney's second fishing game. As far as games go, though, it is fairly creative, and the pond design has that delightful turn-of-the-millennium Barney artwork that's not quite the 90s high point, but still shines regardless. Skipping ahead to 2004, Fisher-Price, after acquiring the Barney license a few years prior, released the Barney Musical Parade game. Now set in the park, the then new setting for Barney and Friends, players must start at the gazebo and traverse the shape spaces with an oversized die in order to reach the caboose. Upon rolling Barney's footprint, the die will play I Love You while players move along. Kind of a power move to pass your opponents with that as your anthem, but hey. Each of the player pieces is a different colored Barney footprint, which is a neat touch, but is also a little funny to visualize playing as a dino stomper smashing through the park. The game is simple, but a little longer than others we've covered thus far, which I give it credit for. It also, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, is one of the few games to feature poor BJ anywhere, whether on the box itself or on the board. Justice for Beige. Either way, the game's a good first foray into this Barney era, and I enjoy the set references and the artwork of the various bandstand park critters across the board. Obligatory pun, sorry. Taking yet another 4-year jump, the Let's Go to the Zoo board game was released by the Canadian group in 2008 and is our first game to feature Riff. Unfortunately for Riff, pictures of the game are pretty sparse, but from what we do know, the object of the game is for a player with one of these infinitely stock art player pieces to be the first to visit all the animals in the zoo. The dinosaurs appear as pop-up characters, so despite not appearing on the board itself, you can remember that this is a Barney game. Movement is determined by a spinner, and that's honestly about it. The game fits with the brand's Let's Go line of books and videos that were being pushed at the time, but otherwise there's not much to say about this one. I can't help but to think a Riff's musical zoo game would have been a much more inspired choice, but as with a lot of later stage merch, the stuff was starting to fall off. D-, see me after class. And to round out our trip around the board is the Barney Collect-A-Shape game, a game that, in direct contrast with the previous title, we know a lot about. Developed by Nikki Bush and Justine Hadra for Just Fun Toys in 2008, both Barney and other hit entertainment characters, namely Thomas, received their own respective board games. A larger, central board game is used to track players' token pieces and roll the die, while players keep track of their own progress on smaller playing sheets, matching the cards they have drawn by shape and color. The first to fill up their playing sheet wins. While visually dense, the game board is leagues ahead of the last game in that it actually has the dinosaurs on it in some form and not just as optional standees. It does reuse a lot of the era common artwork, but I appreciate the inclusion of the higher quality, shaded versions of the characters that were somewhat less frequently used. Interestingly, the game features a miss a turn space with Barney telling you to be a good sport, which would have been a virtually unheard of dynamic earlier in this list, but goes in tandem with Barney's evolution, or devolution, at that time. Still, part of figuring out how to play a board game is learning how to take turns anyway, so I don't take issue with this. I think it's more so the wording. Before closing this out, I wanted to nominate a few honorable mentions that kept coming up in my research, and while they're technically card games, I didn't think 3 games was enough to warrant their own video. That is, unless Mattel drops Barney Blackjack, in which case I will drop everything to cover it immediately. Barring that, we venture back into the 90s for the classic title Memory Game by Milton Bradley, which was released in 1993 and again in 1997 with updated art and the addition of BJ. While they're both clones and function the same, I tend to favor the earlier release with the Barneymania era artwork. There's something delightfully clunky about an art style that hasn't quite found a solid footing yet, and that was no more clear than with early Barney illustrations. Also in 1993, Parker Brothers released the Jumbo Barney card game, a 39-card game that could be played like a big version of Memory Game, or with the main rules of Barney Pair-Up. 9 of these cards are blank U cards that require players to draw 2 self-portrait tokens, with one of the cards being mixed into the draw pile and one in their starting hand. Players draw 1 card each turn and place matches in front of them. If a third matching card in a set is drawn or a match is needed, players must wait until they draw a give-and-take card to obtain a card from another player. When you have a pair of U cards, a Baby Bop pair, and the most Barney pairs, you win the game. For a 3-and-up game, I can see those on the younger end getting a little tied up in the card dynamics, but for older players, it's a good way to reinforce that matching skill while adding in new rules to keep it interesting. I don't know why I find the give-and-take cards so amusing. Maybe it's the back of the card appearing within the card, and the U cards remind me of dry erase magic tokens. Barney drop when? Either way, huge fan of this one. And last but not least, the Canadian group had a chance to redeem itself with Match It, another Memory Game clone. Again, there isn't too much to say that hasn't been said already, but I'll give the game credit for using more uncommon Park-era artwork, especially this Riff, who only ever seems to get like 2 poses, on the tin and in the card design itself. The tin makes it easier to take the game on the go, so now you've finally got an excuse to bring Barney to the game store. And that's about it. While there are some more obvious, weaker titles from this list, namely the reskins and the games that have fairly short game paths, a lot of these are pretty good first games for the Barney set. There are some really creative mechanics and game elements across titles and publishers, and it's interesting to watch the evolution of a character from one specific type of merchandise. We'll have to see if there's another thrilling movie tie-in game somewhere down the line for Barney yet. And as always, if you're looking to learn more, don't hesitate to check out my friends at Barney Wiki and Barney History Fans. Thanks for watching.